Hello student, my name is Kalal from Alger Institute of Engineering and Technology. Welcome to my online lecture series of Basics of Automotive System. So this is the chapter 4 and final topic of this chapter, rear axles. In that topic, various types of rear axles we discussed in this today's lectures. Okay, so we have covered it on previous video lectures that there are two types of drive system or rear axles like a Hotchkiss types. Okay, let me start the new topic, that is the three types of our rear axles. Okay, rear axles is nothing but it is a connection between the differential and our rear wheel. Okay, that means it is your differential. So let me understand, this is our differential and this differential is connected to the power comes from the propeller shaft, and this differential is connected to the side gear. These are the side gear inside in the differential mechanism, and this side gear is connected with this rear axles. Okay, and both side of rear axle is provided. Okay, these are the rear axle. On the rear axle the wheel are mounted, or we can say wheel hub are mounted. So let me discuss these different types of rear axles, this different type of rear axles. Okay, so generally this rear axles is a live shaft axles, or we can say live shaft axle. On these rear axles different types of loads which can bear by this axles. Okay, so let me understand which type of loads comes on that axle. So first of the shearing force due to weight of the vehicle. The first one is the shearing force. Okay, the shearing force due to the weight of the vehicle. The load which comes on the rear axle, that is the shear force. Okay, we already understand the how to count the shear force. Okay, because we assume that the axles is like a simply supported beam. These are the reaction on that beam, and two forces, that is due to on spring to this axles comes on that axle, rear axles. That's why this shear force are induced, and that can be beared by that rear axle shaft. Next is bending moment on account of the load applied through the spring seat. Okay, next bending moment is introduced, and it is comes on that rear axle shaft applied through spring seats. Okay, and thrust and bending moment by end thrust and its reaction offered by tire on the ground and driving torque. That means this all the types of load which comes on that rear axles shaft. Okay, so we design a rear axle and different methods. Okay, so basically types of rear axles is three types: semi floating axles, full floating axle, and 3/4 floating axle. Three types of rear axle shaft we used. First one is a semi floating, full floating, and 3/4 floating. So let me understand one by one what is the semi floating, full floating, and 3/4 floating rear axle shaft. Okay, so semi floating is a very easy and very used in conventional methods, or it is used in a car and light duty vehicles. And full floating is a very robust type and heavy strength. It have a very heavily strength, and it is used in a truck and heavy vehicles. Okay, and 3/4 floating is in between of these two. Okay, semi floating axles and full floating axles. So let me discuss the one by one what is the different in construction of that semi floating, full floating, and 3/4 floating type. Okay, the first one is the semi floating axles. In semi floating axles, these are our axle shaft. Okay, this is our axle shaft on which the axle casings are provided. That means inside the inside this axle casing the axle shaft is provided. These are our axle casing. This is the cross section view. This diagram is nothing but the cross sectional view of the semi floating axle. And this axle casing and axle shaft, between one bearing is provided, roller bearing is provided, or we can say ball bearing. Okay, this ball is shown in the figure. Okay, these are nothing but it is a bearing which provided between, so it can freely rotate. Okay, these are the axle shaft and these are the axle casing. The one end of this axle shaft is connected to the differential by side thrust gear. Okay, this is connected to the differential mechanism, and other end or other extension of other end which is connected to this wheel hub. Okay, this is nothing but this wheel hub, and it is connected to the other end of extension of other end of this axle shaft, and it is done by this and it is connected by the bolt mechanism. We provided bolt, and taper key is also provided to connect the shaft and that wheel hub. Okay, so this is the construction of semi floating axles, and this type of semi-floating axle is used to all types of load which comes on the axles, which are directly comes on that axles, like a torque reactions, side thrust, or we can say shearing force, bending moment, every types of load which directly taken on that axle shaft. These are the semi-floating axle, and this semi-floating axles is used in a light duty vehicles, or we can say car. Another is a full floating axles. In full floating axle, what happens, it is different from that semi-floating axle. That means the axle is fully floated. That means it is the one end is connected to that differential mechanism, that are the similar, but in that the casing is provided over here, which is connected with the two tapered bearing. Here we use the two tapered bearing. That means whenever loads comes on that wheel, that it can be it can be aligned, self-aligned. That's why we use the tapered bearing here, and two tapered bearing are used, and bearing lock nuts is provided to lock that bearing. Okay, and this axle shaft is connected to the this wheel hub and wheel hub. Okay, one end of this wheel hub, and over which wheel struts are provided, and flange sleeve is provided. So these are the axles casing. These are nothing but these are the axles casing. This is nothing but this axles casing, and inside which axle shaft is provided, and bearing is provided on that axles casing. That means the weight does not, total weights, all the four weights, four loads which discussed in the previous video, that not comes on that axle shaft directly. So that in this axle shaft, due to this two tapered bearing is provided, that means only driving torque is beared by that axle shaft, only driving torque, and other loads which are, we can say, torque reactions and other loads which is beared by that axle casing. So that by using of this type of construction, that means the weight of the vehicles and other loads which directly comes on that axles and to the wheel, because the axles and the wheel hub are connected in a parallel way. That's why the load of the vehicles and other loads, okay, which comes on that wheel, okay, or we can say wheel, through the rear axle casing. Okay, rear axles casing, not rear axles. Okay, these are the axle shaft, or this rear axle shaft only taken one type of load, that is a driving torque, because of we use the here two tapered bearing between the flange sleeve and axles. Okay, not between the shaft and axle shaft and the axles casing. That's why it is a different from the semi-floating axles. These are the different from that things. Okay, so keep in mind, and in the exams you can draw these diagrams, okay, smoothly. In that axles only driving torque is bear by that axle shaft. That's why other loads comes does not comes on that axle shaft. That means if axles is failure or broken out during the running condition, or whatever condition is there, if axle is damaged or broken out, that not impact on that vehicle. That means you can easily tow that vehicles. Okay, not break down, or vehicle it comes in a steady condition. You can move easily, and you can go to service or repair centers by tow your vehicles. But it is not in the semi-floating axles, because that in semi-floating all the loads carried by that rear axles. It is only this axles only driving torque can be bear. Okay, these are the full floating axles. So next is the 3/4 floating axles. In that 3/4 floating axle is nothing but it is in between robust full floating axles and simplest semi-floating axles. Okay, that means it is in between of these two kind of, which we already discussed in the previous slides. Okay, these are the 3/4 floating axles. Okay, in that case we bearing is in between. The bearing is provided in between of the our axles. Okay, axles casing. These are the axles casing. It is nothing but axles casing which are hollow. In that our axle shaft is provided. Okay, axle shaft is provided, and these are the axle shaft. So bearing is provided over the axle shaft and wheel hub. These are the wheel hub. Okay, this is nothing but the wheel hub. These are the different from the semi-floating axles. In semi-floating axles, that this type of bearing is in between axle casing and axle shaft. Okay, this is the different from them. Okay, bearing is provided between axle casing, this is axle casing, and this is the wheel hub. Okay, so what is the different from this two? Okay, in that type of 3/4 floating, the bending load and shearing load do not take up or withstand by the axle shaft. That means the whatever loads, bending load or shear loads, or due to vehicle weight which comes on that axle shaft, it is not taken by this axle shaft. So directly the vehicle weight, or due to vehicle weight, bending force and shearing load, or bending load or shearing load, which directly comes on that axle casing, which are taken by the axle casing, and it is transferred to the wheel or wheel load, or we can say wheel or tire. These are the different from them. Okay, but in that semi-floating, what happens, that total loads or different types of load which comes on that axle casing through the which comes on the axle shaft, okay, through the axle casing. Okay, but in that case only one type of load, that is the drive torque, which is taken by that axle casing. This is the different from them semi-floating. In at a time, at a sometimes, or before 90s, before 90s, this type of three-quarter floating axles are used. At one time, this type of three-quarter floatings are popular, and this was used in earlier, okay, three-quarter floating axles. But some changes in the design and materials, and we can say our size, shape, so this type of three-quarter floating axles changed again in the semi-floating axle, and nowadays three-quarter floating axles are not used. So nowadays in full light vehicles, or we can say commercial vehicle, or for cars, the semi-floating axles are used. Okay, so these three-quarter floating axles nowadays not are used in any vehicles. So thank you so much. Our fourth chapter totally completed. In that chapters we covered the differential mechanism, limited slips, and rear axles, different types of rear axles.